Hey everybody, welcome to 5 Minute Financial Markets, weekend edition. Looking at the week that just ended, obviously a shortened week with the Thanksgiving holiday. That means really low volume and not a lot to talk about. Friday's session was basically nothing, a shortened session. You see the volume was extremely low, closed within 10 cents of the open, so really just a nothing day. Let's take a look at the week ahead. As I mentioned last week, this VIX chart is really interesting. So we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down days in a row on the VIX, 6 straight red candles. It sat right down on this support line, actually two support lines going back to the lows in April and August, and a second trend line going back to the lows in January and August. And then look what happened, bounced off of there. Not a super strong bounce, came and settled back near the low of the day. But again, Friday was a super low volume day. Everybody was on vacation. So not a lot of information we can take away from that. I do really think that this VIX needs to bounce back, at least back up to this 22 or so, this previous low here, and maybe even go back and retest this channel, this wedge that it's been trading in all year long. Even if the VIX ultimately does head lower and break through this trend line, it's just come so far so fast. I mean, the RSI on the daily is below 30. It hasn't been below 30 since back in 2008 during the Great Financial Crisis. So this is certainly something to keep an eye on. Another thing I'm really interested in right now is precious metals. We talked about gold last week. Silver has also been on a nice upward move ever since this low on September 1st, around $17.40. It's just been grinding higher within this channel. It's hitting this big resistance area. That's this purple rectangle. There's been a lot of chop in this area historically, and it's going to take a lot to get through that. If it does come out the other side, though, that is extremely bullish for silver, and it could go back up to this right around $25 resistance level. But we'll see if it can get through this chop and through this area of supply here. Gold also is looking really strong, maybe even stronger than silver. Looking at the daily chart, we had this big move up from the low on November 3rd. Let's see, what is this here? Over 10% in 8 trading days. That is a monster move for gold. Hit this downward sloping trend line that's been resistant all the way back to, well, to the post-COVID highs. Bounced off there, found some support, this really strong bullish looking hammer candle right here, and probably going to retest this trend line again. If we can get a move like this, like the retest and a breakthrough, that is really, really bullish for gold. We'll have to see what happens. So looking ahead to news for this week, we've got a big speech by Fed Chair Jerome Powell, 10:30 a.m. Pacific on Wednesday. And then the other big news item is the non-farm payrolls and unemployment rate Friday morning before the open. These are the ones that are going to really move markets. Expect a lot of volatility during Jerome Powell's speech. That's typically what happens. Every word he says sends the traders and the algorithms pushing the market one way or the other. But it'll be interesting to see where this settles out once the speech is done. And then, of course, the non-farm payrolls. Again, we're in a strange time right now where normally a strong number on non-farm payrolls means the economy is doing well, and that's good for the markets. In this case, we're looking for weak numbers on non-farm payrolls, which shows that the economy is cooling down, which means that the Fed might be able to ease up on the brakes and possibly even get towards a pivot sooner rather than later. That's what the market really wants, is for the Fed to stop the hiking, pivot to a neutral stance, maybe even easing if the economic conditions get worse. One last chart I want to look at, which is showing how tech performs versus the S&P 500. So we're looking at the triple Qs, which is the NASDAQ ETF, a lot of high-flying, high-beta tech stocks, dividing that performance by the performance of the S&P, which is the more traditional large-cap companies, including some tech, but a lot of other sectors as well. So you see, this is a trend line that has held since all the way back before the Great Financial Crisis, this low in August of 2007. It served as support all along the way here. During the Great Financial Crisis, in 2013, 2014, we had a flash crash in August of 2015 where it broke through in a day and then came back. Support again in 16 and 17. And then the ratio started to blow out to the upside. You see that we haven't come back to retest that big trend line, but we do have these smaller trend lines that have been support recently. Going back to the lows of 2018, we've had these two trend lines that have served as support at various stages along the way. We can see that recently it started to retest both of those lines. We had a weekly close 4 weeks ago that stopped right at that trend line. The following week it powered through, broke through the other trend line, but then quickly snapped back. And now we're kind of chopping back and forth between these two trend lines. I don't know where it's going to go from here. I don't expect it to retest this big major trend line down here until we're near an overall bottom for the markets. If you look historically, the NASDAQ, which is tech heavy, has bottomed before the S&P and led the recovery. If we do get back to this major trend line again, I think that's going to coincide with a bottom on the NASDAQ and probably the start of the recovery in the overall markets, possibly sometime in 2023. Finally, I got a lot of good feedback on my last video about my day trading SPY options. I'm going to put together a video on my options trading strategies. It's something that's worked really well for me. It's, I'm sure, by no means perfect, and I would very much like to get any critiques or feedback that any of you have on it, but it's done really well for me, at least over the past year during this high volatility environment, and I'd like to share it with you. So look for that video coming out in the next couple of days. Thanks a lot. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.